It was said of the Babylonian sage Shmuel that he was an ish eshkolot, that he was a Renaissance man, the kind of person who brought enlightenment to the world. I think the same could be said without overstating it or exaggerating of our speaker tonight, of Dr. Micah Goodman. He is truly an ish eshkolot. To learn with Dr. Goodman is to experience the joy of being a student, to delight in the exploration of a new text or idea, or to become giddy at the discovery of something new in a text that I've studied hundreds of times before. Somehow studying with Micah makes it feel as fresh as if I'm encountering it for the first time. His CV is impressive, to say the least. He has a doctorate in Jewish thought from the Hebrew University. He's an author of 3 Israeli bestsellers, Moses' Final Speech, The Dream of the Kuzari, and The Secrets of the Guide for the Perplexed. He is one of 2 recipients of the Mark and Henya Liebhaber Prize for Religious Tolerance in 2014, along with Israeli musician Ehud Banai. Dr. Goodman has lectured and taught at the Knesset and the official residence of Israel's Prime Minister and Israel's President. He is a senior fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem and teaches at the Tikva Project in Princeton University. He's also a lecturer at the Hebrew University at his alma mater. And in his spare time, Dr. Goodman directs Ein Prat, which is the Midrashah, Israel's leading pluralistic Beit Midrash for young adults. It has more than 1,750 alumni and some 300 new students each year. Ein Prat strengthens the pluralistic Jewish character of Israel, nurtures connections between Israelis of different backgrounds, and builds a bridge between Israeli young adults and their diaspora peers. He's a leading voice on Judaism and Zionism and the Bible, and it's for all those reasons and many more, which is why it is our distinct zchut, our great privilege and blessing, to learn with him this evening. I could go on, trust me, I could go on, but I won't. I'll just say that even more impressive than his resume, which I've shortened considerably, you should know, even more impressive, what's that?
Thanks for setting the bar high.
And even more impressive than his resume, and even more impressive than his intellectual achievements, which are many, is the passion, joy, and love that Micah Goodman brings to his role as a teacher. Dr. Goodman, it is a pleasure and a joy to be your student. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you so much. That was, well, it's too bad my mom's not here. She would actually believe what you said. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here. Actually, I was never here, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful place right here in the mountains. And life here is very, very good. I've been here. I was a scholar in residence in Orange County in Shabbat. I've been hanging around. Life here is very, very good. And this, you've mentioned, I wrote a book about the Book of the Kuzari. And the Book of the Kuzari is a very interesting book. It's about Middle-Age theology. And it's serious, serious philosophy. And I wrote a serious book about it. You should all buy it. No, it's not in English yet, but my Hebrew book on Maimonides is coming out in May, so you should all buy it. It's called Maimonides and the Book That's Changed Judaism. It's about the secrets of the guide for the perplexed. Anyway, when I was working on the book on the Kuzari, so the Book of the Kuzari is based on a legend, on a very interesting legend, and what's interesting about it is that people believed it. People throughout Europe and the Arab world believe this legend, and it's the following legend. It's a legend that somewhere in the world there's a kingdom that loves Jews. And in that kingdom that loves Jews, they love Jews so much, they admire Jews so much, that their politicians, their elite, decided to become Jewish. And the entire kingdom converted to Judaism. And every time, and this is how the legend goes, it's not a politically correct legend. Every time they see a real Jew, they admire him, they worship him. this was a story told. It was told in communities around Europe. It was told in communities around the Arab world, the Muslim world. And it gave hope to Jews. They all believed it. They believed that in some way there is a place where we're accepted. There is a place where we're loved. That redemption is not only waiting for us in the end of history, but also in some way in the end of geography. The kingdom of the Khazars is inaccessible. It's far, far away. It's beyond the mountains. It's to the east. It's, according to the legend, it's beyond the river of the Sambation. Now that's adding one legend to another legend. Because the river of the Sambation, according to the Talmudic legend, is a river where everything that's good is beyond that river. The 10 lost tribes, they exist. Where are they? Beyond the Nahar HaSam. Everything that's good is beyond. And the problem with Nahar HaSambation is that it's a goesh. How do you say? It's what? And there's a lot of turbulence. Thank you. By the way, I'm Israeli. I'm Israeli in the worst sense of the word. I'm Israeli. I was born in Israel, raised in Israel, never outside of Israel for more than a month, and thank you. And I've been practicing my American accent for a few years now, and I'm trying to, how am I doing so far? Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I actually have a head start. My mom's from Oklahoma City. Yep. See us. In any case, so there's a lot of turbulence in this river, and that is why you can't cross it, but there's one day a week where the river quiets down, according to this legend. And that day is obviously Shabbat. But there's a problem. Halachically, Shabbat, that's the day you can't swim. Now what? So the only day where you could cross, that's the day you're not allowed to cross the river. A cynic would say, I'm not saying this, a cynic would say that this Talmudic legend says that it's because of halacha that we can't reach out to our dreams. I don't say that. Anyway, back to the first legend I'm trying to push, the legend of the Khazars. There is a kingdom where they love Jews. It's far away beyond the mythical river. Redemption is waiting for us in the end of the world. Somewhere it's there, not in the future, in the present. In the end of the world, there is the kingdom that loves Jews. When I was working, now what's interesting to me about this legend, not that it was invented, but that it was accepted. Now, I shared, when I was studying this, with a friend of mine, that she's a psychoanalytic guide, she's a psychoanalyst in Israel. She deals with youth. I told her, what do you think of the fact, but what does it say about our collective psyche? That for many years we believed in this myth, in this legend. And she says, what came to her mind, she works with high school kids. And she said, you know, which kind of kids in high school are most likely to have imaginary friends? Imaginary best friends? Who's most likely to have an imaginary friend? Who? Yeah, that's right. I don't want to share with you all my problems, but my friends. But yeah, the ones who are most lonely, most disliked, most isolated, they're the ones who are most likely to develop imaginary friends, a fantasy of a person that likes them, a fantasy of a person they feel comfortable with. In some way, the Khazars is our collective imaginary friend. And what does that say about our national psyche? I think it says a lot. It says how Jews were always felt so lonely, so needed to be liked, yearning for love, wanting to be accepted. This is an ancient Jewish dream. It was in competition with only one other Jewish dream. It's a different dream, a different yearning. The dream to be powerful, to be sovereign, to be independent. That dream, and they're in competition. One dream is to be independent from the Gentiles, and another one is to be accepted and loved by them. Two competing dreams. dominate the collective psyche. The 19th century comes around, and this is what happens in modernity hits Judaism, and modernity did what modernity does. We have to organize ideologies, give categories, and both dreams got names. The ideology was the dream of being accepted. The wish to be accepted got a name. What was it called in the 19th century? Emancipation. Emancipation. The belief in Europe was that if we teach ourselves, educate ourselves, the haskala, finally we will be accepted, completely accepted among them. Emancipation. The dream to become powerful, sovereign, and independent. Also that dream turned into an ideology and got a name. What was that dream called? Zionism. And then the 20th century happens. In the second half of the 20th century, the dream of being sovereign and independent, that dream came true. We're very powerful in Israel. But the dream to become accepted, to be a part of the world, to be accepted by society, also that dream came true here in North America. David Ellenson puts it beautifully, captures it, that in the 1920s, American Jews, when they went to, if they were frum and they were kippot, and they went to Harvard, so they wanted to hide their kippot, kind of like European Jews today. They want to hide their kippot. So they wouldn't work around with kippot. They used to wear those, those hats they used to wear in the 20s. I mean, the 1920s. How do you call that? Yeah, fedora, the ones, the gentle, yeah. Charlie Chaplin, yeah. Fedora? Fedora, thank you. That should come back to style. So, David Ellenson has it that they felt they had to hide their kippot, not because they felt that if I'm Jewish, I'm in some way less American. In some way, being Jewish is less American, and they were used to the European deal. I have to somehow blur my Judaism in order to be a part of society. I have to hide my Judaism in order to express my Americanism. In the year 2000, this is a great anecdote by David Ellenson that shows the movement. He says in the year 2000, when Joe Lieberman runs for, and I heard he spoke here, ran for vice president, so everywhere he goes, you probably saw this, he was telling jokes about shul politics. He was using words in Yiddish. He was expressing his Judaism. As Ellenson put it, in the beginning of the 20th century, when you're Jewish, you're less American. In the end of the 20th century, when I'm Jewish, I am American. I'm more American. For the first time, Jews are accepted. For the first time, emancipation succeeds. And in a deep sense, it would be fair to say, like many have observed, that Jews are not really accepted into America today. They are America today. They're the ones accepting others to America today. We had two great dreams. One dream to be independent, another dream to be accepted, Zionism and emancipation. Today, in the 21st century, I think it's fair to say that all our dreams have come true. For hundreds of years, we had dreams. Now we are living our dreams. Not in Europe, not in other places. But in Israel, the dream of sovereignty is a reality. In North America, the dream of acceptance and emancipation is a reality. As Ellenson puts it, what is more American than Seinfeld? What is more Jewish than Seinfeld? It's not that the Jews are accepted, Judaism is accepted. Before the World War II, America's narrative, it's the inheritor of the Christian tradition. After World War II, America sees itself as the inheritor of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Jews are 2% of America, but 50% of the narrative. "50% of the narrative. If America is inheritor of the Judeo-Christian tradition, that's very impressive. 2% of the population, but 50% of the narrative. That's not the Kuzari story. It's not a nation that converted, but their narrative in some way converted. Jonathan Sarna writes about this, about how the narrative changed. Which takes me to our problems today. What happens when your dreams come true? What do you do when your dreams come true? By the way, I've learned that in China, this is a curse. May your dreams come true. Why is it a curse? Because there's one thing you lose when your dreams come true. You lose your dreams. You lose the ability to dream. There's not something bigger than life that gives meaning to life. Today, this is our problem. For hundreds of years, our problem is that we didn't have what we wished for. Today, our problem is that we have what we wish for. And it's creating new problems, new threats. How can we live the dream? We need a bigger dream. Now, I'm not here to share with you and to deal with your problems. I want to share with you, to take you to the Israeli story, where that dream came true, and to challenge everything I said until now. In a deep sense, Zionism was never only about creating a state. It wasn't only about sovereignty, independence, and power. There was always something else to Zionism. And I want to take you through to try to understand the way the founding fathers of Zionism and Israelism understood the entire project. And to understand this, there's a lot to work on. But I want to start with observation by an Israeli historian called Shmuel Almog, that researched the rhetoric of the founding fathers of Israelism. A person like Brenner says the following: Hayid mechoar. Yid is derogatory for Jew. Hayid mechoar. The Jew is ugly. אי אפשר שלא לשנוא את היהודי. It's impossible not to despise the Jew. That's nice. Same Echad Ha'am says, היהודי, the Jew, גם כשהוא גוסס, even when he's dying, כשהוא שומע דבר בצע, when he hears about an opportunity to make money, מיד הוא מתעורר, he wakes up. Uri Tzvi Greenberg says, if there was a hierarchy of nations, we wouldn't be in the bottom, we would be the dirt. Uri Tzvi Greenberg. And I know it's upsetting. And why is it upsetting? And I could go on. Why is it upsetting? It's upsetting because how are the founding fathers of Zionism, how do they sound like? You could say it. It sounds like anti-Semitism. Now that's confusing because this is how I was taught in high school about Zionism. Zionism was a reaction to anti-Semitism. Right? What's a classic narrative? Theodor Herzl, he's a reporter, and he has to report on the Dreyfus Accords, and he meets anti-Semitism when outside of the courtroom in Paris, the capital of emancipation, people are yelling, death to the Jews. That's the moment where he became a Zionist. When Karl Lugar, an anti-Semite, became the mayor of Vienna, here you have the first Jewish mayor of LA. Well, there you had the first anti-Semite mayor of Vienna. That was a moment where he became a Zionist. These things happen. Zionism, the way we're taught, I'm pretty sure that's how they teach Zionism here, right? Is a reaction to anti-Semitism. Well, Shmuel Almog says maybe it's deeper than that. Maybe it's not only a reaction to anti-Semitism, maybe it's also an internalization of the anti-Semitic view. That can't be true. It sounds true. It seems similar. But there is a fundamental difference between anti-Semitism and Zionism. They both have a problem with Jews. They both see it as a sickness, using horrible language and terrible images. But the difference is that anti-Semites thought that disease, that sickness, is genetic. And Zionists thought it's environmental. Meaning, if it's genetic, so what's the problem? It's uncurable, but if it's environmental, if it's created by circumstances, and the circumstances are the galut, our diaspora, what does that mean? That if we change the circumstances, we'll cure the Jew. We have to take him out of cold Europe, put him in warm Israel. He'll work the ground. He'll have a gun. He'll go to war. He'll speak Hebrew. He'll shake off religion. And guess what will happen? A new Jew will be born. As Ze'ev Jabotinsky puts it, will create, it's an amazing line, Geza Psychologi Chadash Shel Yehudim. I'll translate, a new psychological breed of Jews will be born. A new Jew. This is what Zionism was about. Zionism wasn't only a political movement trying to create a state that didn't exist. It was also a therapeutic movement trying to create a Jew that didn't exist. And this was a dream. Not only a political revolution, a psychological revolution, changing the personality, the psyche of a people. Now, to understand this side of Zionism, we have to understand, like, if Zionism is there to cure the Galut Judaism, we have to understand how they thought. What was the problem in Galut Judaism? What was the disease? What was the problem? And to do this, we have to go back to Spinoza. Spinoza offers a critique of Judaism that the founding fathers of Zionism learned and embodied. It's the following critique. It's a critique of halacha. Can I say a critique of halacha in shul? Okay, it's a critique of halacha. And it's the following critique. Spinoza asks the following question, and this is what scholars call its anthropological critique of religion, not a theological critique of religion. Theological critique is when you question the source of religion. Maybe it's not from God. An anthropological critique of religion is not when you're questioning the divine source of religion, it's when you're questioning the product of religion. Not what is the source of halacha, but what is the product of, how does a person that obeys halacha, how does that person eventually look like? When you're persuaded by a theological critique of religion, you don't believe in it. When you're persuaded by anthropological critique of religion, you might believe in it, but you don't want to be like that person. Who is the product of halacha according to Spinoza? A person that obeys halacha every day, all day. How does he look like? How does he look like in the end? Spinoza says the problem with halacha is that there is a lot of them. There's many, many halachot. And halachot have a tendency to create themselves. There is an inflation of, there's so many halachot. There's so many laws in the Jewish law. You know, I assume that every one of you is, as we're talking, violating one of them. Just saying. Just saying. Now, if you want to obey everything, and you always got, I mean, I don't know, some might not know. Do you know there's a halacha that tells you what shoes, how do you put on your shoes in the morning? Who didn't know that? Well, you're not, you're not putting your shoes on correctly. It tells you which shoes to tie first. Halacha controls people. It's about control. Spinoza argues that a person that practices halacha is a person that practices being controlled, and therefore it creates obedient human beings. It creates robots. It creates submissive people. According to Spinoza, it's a manipulation to turn a people into a people that are easy to control. He obviously didn't know Jews. But that's his theory, at least. Anyway, this is the critique of the founding fathers of Zionism. Jews, now I'm using, especially now, one thinker called one of the most important thinkers among the founding fathers of Zionism. I'm using now Micah Yosef Berdichevsky. My name is Micah, I have no relation. Micah Yosef Berdichevsky. Now Berdichevsky writes a lot about this. According to him, in the Galut, Jews are controlled not by one authority, but by two authorities. Who are the two authorities that are controlling the Jew in the Galut? First of all, there's the Galut, there is the Gentiles, there is the European nation states or empires, and then you're controlled by another authority. What's that? Halacha. This is what they got from Spinoza. Halacha. Or the way Berdichevsky puts it, you're controlled by your past. Your past is controlling you. You're controlled by, Ari Shavit puts it different, the two G's. What are the two G's? The two authorities of Jews in the Galut? The two G's? The Goy and God. No, so there's two authorities controlling you. And because Zionism is an attempt to liberate the Jew, it has to liberate him or her from both authorities, from the Goy and God together, from the European nation states and from the past, and from halacha together. That's why it's a double revolution. Secular Zionism has to come together, secularism and Zionism, because it's there to liberate the Jew from both authorities. And when it liberates him from both authorities, it liberates his personality. Now, what's the problem with the personality? When you're controlled by two authorities, you're also filled with two different sets of anxiety. The fear of the Goy and the fear of God. Now, these are two different fears. The fear of Goy is one set of fear. And the way, the contract that was guarding the Jews in the Middle Ages is the following contract. Jews had no ability to protect themselves. So who protects the Jewish community from the rage of the masses? Who's supposed to protect the Jewish community? The government, the king, the government. So the Jews have to please government all the time, so they will block the masses from attacking them. Now what happens when you have to constantly please power? You have to satisfy your authority. What does that turn you into when you constantly have to do that? Satisfy. What does that turn you into? That turns you, that a person that constantly has to satisfy power becomes a slave, becomes pathetic. Becomes pathetic. Because when you're satisfying, you're pleasing, you're not yourself. You're You know the TV show called Friends? You all know Friends? Because it's an Israeli TV show. I don't know if you knew about it. So, Friends. So there's this guy. Some of the writers of Friends are actually Jews. One of them actually lives in Jerusalem today. Yeah, he's a Baal Tshuva. He learns Talmud now in Jerusalem. I bumped into him. And they captured something very interesting. That they captured the fact that people have a tendency to overlaugh from jokes of their bosses. Remember that one? There's this guy called Joey. You know this one? There's this guy called Joey, and he has a wife called... Not Joey. Sorry. Chandler. I'm sorry. I should be more rehearsed than my philosophy. I'm sorry. Chandler and his wife is called... Monica, okay, great. And one day Monica goes with Chandler to his office. And Chandler's boss makes a very ridiculously not funny joke. But how does Chandler react to that? How does he laugh? It's an overlaugh. It's an overlaugh. Monica asks him, what was that? And then Chandler answers, this is a great line. What does he answer? This is my work laugh. This is my work laugh. And Monica thinks, anyway, and they capture something. When we overlaugh, when we're next to authority, we're pathetic. We have work laugh. We're pathetic. The critique of the founding fathers of Israel is that Jews next to authority became pathetic, pleasing, satisfying, no self-dignity. But the fear of God also brings the worst out of you. Because when you're afraid of God, afraid of being punished by God it could be a disturbing fear. By the way, if there is a myth that helps, and this was written about, to control masses, it's not a belief system. It's not the belief in heaven. You know what really enables people to control masses? It's not heaven. It's Gehinnom. It's hell. Because when you believe that if I won't satisfy God, I will burn in hell, that gives a lot of power to people that know what God wants. to the people who interpret his word. That gives them a lot of power. I got a YouTube about a year ago that shows 2 years ago, an Israeli preacher. Also, we have preachers called the Amnon Yitzchak. Anybody hear of him? And he's faced with about 10,000 believers. And he says to them a question I never thought anybody would ever ask. He asks them, "Atem yodim lama lo kedai lachem lalechet lagehenom?" Do you know why it's not a good idea to go to hell? And they're all like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why? I didn't, why?" And then he answers, because he has a great sense of humor, he answers, "Kicham shama." Because it's hot, it's warm there. That's why. I guess that's a good reason. It's too warm there. Now, listen, what does that bring out? If I violate, there's inflation of laws, but if I violate them, I'll burn in hell. What does that turn me into? Constantly, obsessively, you need to obey all the laws, perform all the halacha, or else I'll burn in hell. That turns you into a neurotic person. Here is the problem. The Jew in the Galut, what I'm trying to do now is offer a character of the way the founding fathers of Zionism saw the Galut Jews. They saw them as pathetic and neurotic human beings. They're pathetic because they're constantly pleasing the goy, and they're neurotic because they're constantly trying to obey God. How's that for a healthy personality? You have to satisfy the goy because the goy could make this life miserable, and you have to satisfy God because God could make the next life, your next life, miserable. And good luck with that. And raise healthy, mentally healthy children. Zionism was created to liberate the Jew from both authorities and from both fears, to create a fearless Jew. A Jew that's not controlled, a Jew with no authority, a Jew with no fear, a Jew as geza psychologi chadash shel Yehudim, a new psychological breed of Jews. Nothing can control him, nothing can govern him. A Nietzschean Jew, where there's no constraints on his personality, no constraints on his behavior. By the way, that includes manners too. I'm serious. What are manners? Social norms that are somehow constraints on our behavior? The new Jew doesn't care. The new Jew. Ben Gurion says, "Lo chashuv ma hagoyim yagidu, chashuv ma Yehudim yasu." It doesn't matter what the goy will say. What matters is what Jews will do. Berdichevsky says, he has a great line. He says, "Matratenu," it's an amazing line. "Leshachrer et haYehudim me'ayahadut." Our purpose is to liberate Jews from Judaism. And this new Jew, no fear, no authority, no social norms, no manners, no... By the way, this was also a dream that came true. Now what do you do when your dreams come true? This was also a dream that came true. A new Jew was born. Berdichevsky puts it, "Anachnu," the founding fathers, "Hador ha'acharon shel haYehudim." Unbelievable. We are the last generation of Jews. The next generation, Dor Rishon shel Ivrim, the new generation of Hebrews. This is the new Jew, the uncontrolled, fearless Jew that later on we started calling the Tzabach. You see, Zionism is not only a very successful political movement, it's also a very successful therapeutic movement. Some would say too successful. There was a price to pay. There was a big price to pay for this revolution. Here is one of them. The Jew that disconnects, that's not controlled by his past, his or her past. that's liberated from tradition. This is a Jew. Well, first of all, we have to understand this Jew. When you go to Israel and you see Israelis sometimes being Israeli, you have to understand, you bumped into an unbelievable product of a successful revolution. You also bumped into somebody suffering 1,800 years of being controlled, created a very radical reaction. What you're seeing is post-trauma. I'm serious. What you're seeing is for the first time, we're breathing. It's us. It's about us. It's a radical reaction. Eventually, like radical reactions, eventually somehow maybe we'll find, it's a metaphor in Hebrew, the metultelet, where you go from one side to the other extreme. The pendulum, thank you. The pendulum, thank you. That was a good word. That's probably not a good word, but it sounds like a good word. The pendulum, it goes from one extreme to another. It might end up in a healthy place in the middle. But for the first 3 generations, what you're seeing is now, I mean, I don't want to speak now too much about Israel. I want to think about, but I just want to say, Israelis, one of the reasons why you can't understand Israelis is that Israelis think authenticity, being straight, not putting things, it's holy. Israelis will always, what you see as being rude, Israelis see as being authentic. When Israeli looks at an American being like very polite, well, when an American sees us being polite, you know what Israeli sees? Being fake, being phony, being a little bit too artificial. Israelis can't be rude. There isn't a word in Hebrew for rude. So they can't be rude because there isn't even a word. If anyone would ever be able to invent a word in Hebrew for rude, that would be almost anti-patriotic. Yeah, there isn't a word because we are... You have a word? What? Perfect. That's in Hebrew? Thank you. Thank you. בלתי נימוסי. אתה לא מנומס. אתה לא מנומס. Yeah. There isn't a word for being לא מנומס. You have to use 2 words. Yeah. You have to... Gas ruach. Also, that's 2 words. What? What? Straight. No, yashar means honest. Dugri. That's right. Say it. There was a price to pay for this. There was a price to pay for this. This new liberated free Jew, free spirit that North Americans have a tendency to admire at the same time, not hardly interact, stand in line in Israel. There was a price to pay for this. And one of the prices is that when you disconnect yourself from your past, you're effectively disconnecting yourself from anyone who shares that past. Israelis don't feel connected to diaspora Jews. I'm speaking in generalizations, yes. Israelis don't feel connected to diaspora Jews because when you're disconnected from your past, you don't feel connection with other Jews that share that past. What becomes a source of identity is a space. I feel solidarity with all the people that are with me in this land. We replace space, time for space. What connection do I have in Israel you have with a Jew in Montevideo or in New York or in LA? The fact that we share the same memories, the same tradition, the same path. But if I disconnected myself from my past, effectively, I'm disconnected from all the Jews that share that past, which creates one of the paradoxes of Zionism. It's a Jewish solidarity that created the Jewish state, and then that state is blocking within it Jewish solidarity. I think there's more prices. By rebuilding into the past, we're losing the great benefits of Judaism. that offer humility, that makes time sacred, that build sacred communities. All that was lost in the revolution. But now I have something to say. Things are changing in Israel. The past 15 years are changing. In the past 10 years are changing even more. In the past 5 years are changing even more. Things are changing in Israel. I want to throw some names at you. Ehud Banai. Anyone here hear of Ehud Banai? Okay. You have connections to Israel? Yes. You're Israeli? Okay. Okay. That's a strong connection. Yeah. Ehud Banai. You also know Ehud Banai? All right. You're Israeli? But you love him Israeli music. Ehud Banai. Beri Sakharov. You know Ehud Beri? Beri. Eti Ankri. Kobi Oz. Evyatar Banai. The names I'm throwing at you, if you were young Israelis, you'd be screaming now just by mentioning those names. You know what? I mean, these rock stars, these singers, here's what they're not. They're not the weird, daring, avant-garde, challenging mainstream music. Ehud Banai is not challenging mainstream music. This is mainstream music. This is how it looks like. Kobi Oz is mainstream music. Ehud Banai. What's interesting about all the singers I just mentioned, they're all doing Jewish music today. Every one of them. They're all doing Jewish music today. Ehud Banai in concert sings El Adon Al Kol Hamas. You didn't pay me to sing, so yeah. And it's charismatic. They do Karl Bach. Eti Ankri is doing poems of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Beri Sakharov is doing Ibn Gabirol. Everybody's doing Tehillim. Tehillim is back. Everybody's doing Psalms. Everybody's doing Psalms. New tunes, modern tunes, amazing tunes to ancient words. I asked Kobi Oz, why are you all going Jewish? This is new. It used to be that when you come to Israel, you want to hear Jewish music, so you have to put on the radio, you have to move to the Haredi stations and hear, the Yababam. But today, if you want to hear Jewish music, you could put on Gal Galatz. Gal Galatz is the most, right? This is the most popular radio station. By the way, you don't have to go to Israel to listen to Gal Galatz. You could listen here on the internet to Gal Galatz. I think it's 91. Just put on Gal Galatz and the internet. It's 91.8. Gal Galatz, and listen to Israeli music. You'll bump in every third song will be a Jewish song. I asked Kobi Oz, what's happening? Why are you doing Jewish music? And here's what he told me. Because music is a free market in Israel. And we want a lot of young people to come to our concerts. Artists are the first to realize a new zeitgeist. They're the first to realize that something is changing, that the spirit of the generation has changed. It used to be that you go Jewish, you lose the youth. Today in Israel, if you add Jewish flavor, young Israelis come to your concerts. It's not only Jewish music. It's also Jewish education. And Machon Hartman started this program called the Be'eri program, where secular high schools learn a little bit more Judaism. One school starts today, I think, and then another joins. You know how many schools in Israel have that today? I think over 200. And a program I'm affiliated with, Ein Prat. It's a Beit Midrash. I think some people were actually here that were in Ein Prat, right? That's right. So, and it's a Beit Midrash for Israelis after the army, studying intensively for 4 months. When we started this in 2006, you know how many students signed up? 6. Actually, one of and it was hard to recruit. Who would want to come and learn Talmud and Bible combined with philosophy? Who would want to come? Actually, one of them I persuaded to come. He was hitchhiking, and I gave him a ride, and I convinced him to join while we were driving. So it was so hard to recruit at the time. We thought that this is a great recruiting method. Maybe we should drive around Israel and kidnap people hitchhiking. That would be a good method. 4 months later, we had 7 and it was a great jump, and we did a party. We have now 7 students, and then next year we had 16, and then 17, and then 45. I'll fast forward. This year we have 320 students after the army learning. This is a phenomenon happening around Israel. Israelis are starving. Something about the Zionist revolution is changing. Let me try to explain what's happening. When I said before that Zionism is also a therapeutic movement, Jews rebelling against 2 authorities, the Goy and God, being controlled by Europe and also being controlled by their tradition, that was true, but it was only partially true. There was another thinker, an important one, a great one, called Echad Ha'am. Asher Ginsburg. You heard of Echad Ha'am? Echad Ha'am had a different vision for the new Jew. This was his vision. Like Berdichevsky, he thought that we have to liberate the Jew. But he thought that liberating the Jew doesn't mean you liberate him from his past. It actually means you liberate his relationship with the past. Orthodoxy presents, I was raised Orthodox, but I'm going to be a little bit critical now. Presents one way to have a relationship with your past. That's a relationship where, in the end, you're controlled by your past. But think about it. Most relationships, most good relationships that we have in our lives, are not based on control. Most of the times you could have an intimate connection to someone without being controlled by that someone. Well, in Israel, it was always like you have 2 options. Either you're controlled by your past, or you're disconnected from your past. Echad Ha'am said, I could be connected to my past without being controlled by my past. I could have a relationship with my past without being somehow trapped in my past. Between Orthodox Judaism, where you're, according to them, controlled by your past, or Berdichevsky secularism, that you're disconnected from your past, Echad Ha'am tried to offer middle ground Judaism, where I'm connected to my past, but I'm not controlled by that past. Guess what happened? There was a great big disagreement between Berdichevsky and Echad Ha'am. How do you liberate the Jew? Do you liberate him from his past, or do you liberate his attitude towards his past? Now, this disagreement is a very important disagreement. This is the disagreement. Someone said that if you want to understand Western civilization, you have to understand the disagreement between Plato and Aristotle. If you want to understand the Talmudic world, you have to understand the founding disagreement between Hillel and Shammai. If you want to understand Jewish philosophy, you have to understand the disagreement between Rambam and Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. If you want to understand secular culture in Israel, you have to understand the disagreement between Berdichevsky and Echad Ha'am. This is the foundational disagreement. How do we liberate ourselves? By liberating ourselves from our past, or liberating our attitude towards the past. In the founding generation and the generation that came later, it seems like the disagreement ended with a victory. Who won the argument? Berdichevsky. A generation of disconnected secular Israelis was born. As Yaakov Chazan, the founder of the Shomer HaTzair, you know the Shomer HaTzair? A very secular, socialist, ardent movement, said, has a great line. He said, Ratzinu dor shel epikorsi. Kibalnu dor shel amaratzi. We wanted to create a generation of epikorsim, of heretics. What we got was a generation of ignoramuses. This is Yaakov Chazan, the founder of the Shomer HaTzair. Heretic means that you know tradition and you're rebelling against it. Ignoramus means you're not rebelling because you don't know. That's the failure of secularism, where you can't rebel anymore. That's the failure. I think what's happening today throughout Israel, young secular Israelis embracing Judaism. Did you see Ruth Calderon's speech in the Knesset? Okay, her first speech in the Knesset, she speaks in the Knesset, she gives a Talmud class, and everyone's confused. What's going on? She's secular, and she's teaching Talmud to all these Orthodox MKs sitting there. She's a woman teaching Torah to men. She ends with a bracha invented by a secular Israeli, a godless bracha. And she sang a bracha, and the only people in the Knesset saying Amen were this MKs from Shas. Because it's Pavlovian, they hear bracha, they say Amen, and then they, oh. That was a great moment. And it was on YouTube and it went viral for a reason. It captures something that's changing. Categories are crashing. Here's what's not happening. Young Israelis listening to Jewish music, learning Torah. This is what's not happening. They're not becoming religious. That's not what's happening. It's not, I want to use Hebrew, it's not chilonim becoming datiim. Meaning it's not secular Israelis becoming religious Israelis. What is happening, it's Israelim becoming Yehudim. It's Israelis becoming Jewish. That's what's happening. Or a different way, it's secularism is changing from a Berdichevsky form of secularism to an Echad Ha'am form of secularism. By the way, this whole lecture was here just for that line. Yeah. All the pieces now come together. Yeah. Berdichevsky to Echad Ha'am. This is a shift happening in our identity. But here's what I find interesting and exciting. If Israelis are connecting to their past again, without being controlled by that past, so they might find themselves that they're connected to the Jews that share that past. And this might be an opportunity to build a stronger connection between the next generation of Israelis and North American Jews. And this is where you come in. This is an important moment. Israelis finding their past without a new way to the past, not the Orthodox way, meaning being controlled by the past, finding the Echad Ha'am path to the past, connected to that past, without losing their liberty, and then maybe being connected to the Jews that share that past. It's not going to be easy. I feel like I'm speaking for too long, and I want to open this for Q&A. Can I offer one more, another 5? Yes? Rabbi, are you okay? I'm going to offer one last observation, and then we're going to open it, okay? I think this is what's happening today. And this I learned to understand the disagreement between Berdichevsky and Echad Ha'am. Two different paradigms. What does it mean to be a new Jew? When I was in basic training, I had a commander called Eyal. Hamfaked Eyal. That's how we called him. Mifaked means commander. Hamfaked Eyal. And I have terrible memories from him. When I was in basic training, this is what happens. If you lose something, so the punishment is that you're attached to that something. Let's say I lose like a canteen. So you have 2 canteens. Now you have to hang out with 3. Okay? You have to walk around with it. Now, one day I was in charge of carrying, I don't know if you say it's in English, a jerry can. Jerry can is also English? That contains 20 liters of water. Liter is English? Okay. So it's a heavy thing. I was supposed to carry it, and I forgot it in the bathroom. I lost it. So guess what? Now I'm punished to walk around with a jerry can, 20 liters. And guess what? I lost that one also. So Mefaked Eyal tells me, Goodman, tonight you're going to pay. So after the day is over, I meet Mefaked Eyal. It's dark. It's night. He has to bring with me 2 jerry cans of 20 liters with me. And there was a hill there. And he says, Goodman, you see that tree? It's on the top of a hill. He looks at his watch. You have 8 minutes to run up, touch the tree, and come back. I run. I come back 13 minutes. Obviously what he says? Again. I run up. I come back 12 and a half minutes. Again. I run up. Say, this is going to last all night. I don't know what to do. This Mefaked Eyal, he's going to ruin me. So I start running up, and then I had this brilliant idea to cheat. That was a philosophic moment. Yeah, this is my way out. So I make it to the half of the hill. I look around, don't see anyone. I turn around, I start running back, and guess who I see right there? Hamfakeh Dayal. I have a trial. This is the worst thing. Oh my God, we can't trust you. I got to try. It was horrible. Okay. I'm only sharing this with you for therapeutic reasons. I'm sorry, I needed a group. I close my eyes, this is what I see, this guy. So, the years pass. I go to university, do my first degree, second degree, PhD, start teaching in Hebrew University. I guess this Mefaked Eyal guy finished the army, was laid back, didn't do anything. Goes to Hebrew U very late in life. He's in first year in Hebrew U. I'm a professor in Hebrew U. I walk down the corridor and I bump into him and I see him. I'm filled with anxiety. I say, "Oh, I'm Mefaked Eyal." And he's like, and I'm like, "How can I help you?" And I finish the interaction with him and I ask myself, "Micha, what's wrong with you? He's not your commander anymore. There's nothing he can do to you. He's a schlepper first year in Hebrew U. He's scared of the university. I am the university." What? So I say to myself, you know what? Next time you see him, I'm going to train my eyes not to see authority, just to see him. Not to see Hamfaked Eyal, just to see Eyal. Well, next time I bump, so a few days later, I see him from far, and I see Hamfaked Eyal. I just moved to the other corridor. And I realized, here's the question, and this is a fundamental question that needs to be. We all know that many times you have a relationship with someone that has authority, then he loses or she loses their authority, and how do you continue the relationship? Berdychevsky argues that our tradition always has so much authority attached to it. Every time we'll learn Torah, every time we'll perform a chag, authority will come and control us. Our only way to get rid of the authority is to get rid of tradition altogether. That's Berdychevsky. Echad Ha'am thought, as opposed to my relationship with Eyal, that we could actually mature. That we could actually take tradition, strip it from its authority, and enjoy a great relationship with our tradition. I think for the first 3 generations, and here's my metaphor. I kind of think, this was a few years ago, I hope, after a lot of therapy, if I'll see Mefaked Eyal today, I'd probably just see an Eyal. It takes time. It takes time. It took 3 generations to move from Berdychevsky to Echad Ha'am. But I think now is a time where Israelis are really willing to embrace their past without the fear that they'll lose their sense of self while they do it. This was my reading. We'll move to questions now. First of all, thank you. 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 What I want to say is, let me just try to set the rules of the game. I want to say 3 things. 1, ask whatever you want. I'm an Israeli. I could take it. Okay? 2, feel free to ask even things that are linked to what I said, not directly what I said, things that interest you regarding Jewish identity, Israel, issues in Israel. Ask whatever. I know everything. So I'm just joking. So ask whatever you want. And finally, I think we're going to try to offer like a framing for the time. We'll take 20 minutes of questions. And then I'll stay here to schmooze a little bit so whoever doesn't get to ask a question, maybe.
And the one thing I'd like to request is if you do ask a question, please tell us what community you're from, because we're represented by 16 synagogues here, and it'd be nice if we understood who was here. Thank you.
I'm from Temple, Beth. My name is Diane. My question, you talked about Hashomer Hatzair. My first experience in Israel was 74, 75 at a Hashomer Hatzair kibbutz. All right, which today I went back to go visit, has a kosher kitchen. Then it was vegetarian and treif. Okay, I'm sharing that but for a reason. There was discussions in 1974 about the need for Jewish education, Jewish history in the secular high schools because the kids didn't have a connection to the land or the people.
Yeah.
It wasn't about being religious. So you shared that now, and I'm going, what happened between 74 and 2014 when that question was being asked so many years ago?
Yeah, it took time. It took time. You see, I want to offer another way to think about it. The first generation of secular Israelis, they came from the yeshiva world or the Hasidic world, which means they had a religious, they grew as religious and then they left religion, which means in their psyche, they had religious passion and secular theology. Very complicated people they were. Religious passion and secular, but the next generation doesn't have the passion, only the theology. The third generation didn't even have the theology anymore. And as a result, there was a need to reconstruct it. One of the problems in Israel is the following, and this is that because of an interesting mistake that we made by linking powerfully synagogue and state in Israel, I'm willing to speak about that if you want, but one of the prices we paid for that was that it made the Berdichevsky revolution alive for a long time, because Berdichevsky was rebelling against the past, but for 3 generations, secular Israelis were rebelling not against the past that controlled them, but against the way they saw government that tried to control their religion. So I would say linking government to religion gave Berdichevsky a longer ride than he deserved.
Over here. Gail Leibovitz, Temple Beth Am, and the American Jewish University. So that actually leads, I think, perfectly into what I was hoping to ask and kind of put on the table. I'm thinking about Israeli politics. In the last election cycle, a very unusual thing happened, which was the rise of the Yesh Atid party, which was very explicit. We're not going to make a coalition with the Haredi parties. And that was and you got people like Ruth Calderon then in the Knesset. At least from what I'm seeing and hearing about the current election cycle, it looks like that may, Yesh Atid has,
Great question.
it was the party of the moment. Every cycle there's a party of the moment. They are no longer the party of the moment. There's a good chance that there'll be a coalition. And how do you think, I sense that other factors play in here, how Israelis are feeling about what happened in Gaza this summer, how Israelis are feeling about the situation with Iran, with United States negotiations with Iran, whether you're pro, con. So I feel, what are some of the other factors that are figuring in here?
Yes. First of all, I'll answer you honestly, but this is my own politics. I'm not, a representative of the Israeli government or anything. My own. The way I understand, the last government lost a great, great opportunity. We had a government without the ultra-Orthodox in the government. It was an opportunity to change the relationship between synagogue and state in Israel. It was a great opportunity. But they used that political capital for something else, to change the relationship between secular Israelis and Haredim. Meaning that it was very important for Israelis to get the Haredim into the army and into the workforce. It was very important. So they used the political capital not to change the relationship between religion and state in Israel, but between Haredim and Israel. I thought that was a mistake. I thought, let them not go to the army. You know what? That's not essential. But religion in Israel should be a free market. So it's my understanding, my understanding that Israelis are so obsessed with the Haredim that we wasted that moment on getting the Haredim to the army and not in changing the nature of religion in Israel. That's my critique of that government, and it's possible that that opportunity will not happen again this election. But I'm hopeful. I am hopeful. Israeli politics, anything could happen, and let's just wait for the 17th of March.
Here.
Whatever you were saying, it seemed to me it applied more to European Jews than Jews that came from Arab countries. We do not have Reform Orthodox or whatever else you have in the middle. We don't have Dati, not Dati. Everybody did the same thing. We don't have Mizrahi, Ashkenazi, what else, Sephardic. And we don't have all the anxieties, it seems to me again, that the European Jews have. In this movement that you were talking, liberating yourself from the past, cutting yourself, did that apply equally to the Jews from Arab countries, or you're not addressing it, or it's different?
I would say the Jews that immigrated to America didn't only immigrate to the new, from Russia, Poland. They only immigrate from there. They also immigrated from the Jewish community where they were controlled by their rabbis. America, the American story is also a parallel attempt to liberate the Jew. But I would say American identity wasn't founded on the anger of Israelis on religious authority. I would say that if I said before that the distinction between Beryshevsky and Echad Ha'am, if you're liberated from your past or you liberate your past, I would say progressive American Judaism sounds just like that, right? That's why if Israelis go on a Echad Ha'am route, they might find that they're very close to a certain brand of American Judaism. And you know what? Sociologically speaking, an interesting thing is that Israelis are promoting that form of Israeliness many times are North Americans. Oh, the Mizrahim. I'm sorry. I didn't understand you. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about American Jews. I'm sorry. Mizrahim, that's a great question. I know. I'm just saying the way it's, you're right. You're 100% right. She was asking, it's a very important question. The narrative I was offering is a European narrative. She's asking, what about the Jews are not European? Close to 1 million Jews in the 1950s and 60s from Muslim countries immigrated to Israel with a different narrative. Now, I just want to say one thing about this group. They have a different attitude towards Judaism, which in Israel we call Masortiim. Now, Masortiim does not mean Hatnu'ah HaMasortit. It doesn't mean
Translate Masorti.
It doesn't mean It doesn't mean conservative Judaism. It means Masorti means traditional. Now, I think this is what Masorti is. It means this is how an Israeli philosopher called Meir Buzaglo conceptualizes being Masorti. Being Masorti, being Orthodox is about obeying tradition. Being Masorti means being loyal to tradition. It's not about authority, it's about loyalty. Now you feel loyal. It's about loyalty. The way I might live different than my grandparents, but always be in some way loyal to those grandparents. These are the Israelis that will do Kiddush every Shabbat and then go to a soccer game. They'll go to shul in Shabbat morning, and then because they go to shul not because they're obeying the law of going to shul, it's because they're loyal to a tradition where you go to shul. And that form of Israelism, Masorti Israelism, I feel that when they came to Israel in the 50s and the 60s, they didn't come and say, hey, you should all be like us. They didn't say to Orthodox Israelis, stop obeying, be loyal. They didn't say to Chilonim, hey, stop being disconnected, just be loyal. They didn't do that. What happened was reverse. Chiloni Israelis tried to turn them to secular European Israelis. Dati Israelis tried to turn them into Orthodox Israelis. One of the products of that is Shas. I think what might be happening today is that it's reversing. More and more Israelis are interested in the Masorti model. Meaning, if in the beginning Israel tried to change them, maybe today they're a little bit changing Israel. And I think the Echad Ha'am model might fit into the Masorti model. There is room here for many, many models of how to be connected to your past without being necessarily controlled by that path. And the Masorti is a very important move here.
I'm Dara Frimmer. I'm one of the rabbis at Temple Isaiah, which is a Reform synagogue, which is why my question is actually about Reform Judaism, or to get you a little bit back on that last question of just a parallel to progressive Judaism in the United States. At various times as you were talking, I thought you could put Reform Judaism in for Israelis, even to the extent that as we think about how Reform Jews in the 1800s rejected the sort of traditional background in order to liberate themselves, there's been a return to tradition. And when I first started working at Temple Isaiah 8 years ago, we started to ask people to stand for the last paragraph of Lecha Dodi. And this was considered to be very shocking. And were we turning, they said, into conservative Jews? And so part of me wants to say, it's not Reform Jews becoming religious, it's Reform Jews just becoming Jewish. Is it the same phenomenon of Reform progressive American Jews returning to what Israelis are also trying to return to, some sense of identity that's not controlling them but allows them to express something purposeful?
I want to be very careful here because I don't want to. What they call Ruth Calderon is a cultural Jew. For her, Judaism is not a religion; it's a culture, and it's a culture that fills her. For Masortiim, it's a religion that they're loyal to. There's different forms here. Now, for many, many Israelis, they're very sensitive to God talk. Very sensitive to the God thingy. It's about, I would say, for many of them, learning Torah, performing rituals, is joining a people that does that and not believing in a God that in some way wants that. And that's why, since Reform is very religious, and there's God, and there's all these things there, that's why I think it might look similar, but for Israelis, it's an act of joining, not worshiping. It's an act of culture, not an act of ritual. Now, that's a generalization. For some Israelis are interested in God. Ruth Calderon, by the way, is. She's a very godly person. But for most these kind of Israelis that I interact with, they're sensitive to the God thingy. And for them, it's joining and not, for the most part, joining and not believing.
Judith?
Hi, Micah.
Hi.
First of all, just thank you, Micah. And
Thank you.
everyone needs to know that this revolution, in so many ways, has been spearheaded by Dr. Micah Goodman. I mean,
Thank you.
the influence of Enporat and what you've done is just so amazing, and the Hartman.
That's right.
Having said that, I guess I have a question and a comment, and my question is basically, what do we do? Because
Yeah.
in America tend to look at things through the lens of Reform Judaism. I'm the rabbi of a Reconstructionist synagogue in Malibu. Masorti does not really match conservative, even though we have the same word. And Israelis are going to come up with it. It's got to be Israeli and it's got to be organic. At the same time, we want the connection. Everybody in this room wants to support Israel in a way that isn't just a one-way street, and that we can connect really with what's happening. Now, what you just described is like a little plant for Tu B'Shvat that's budding now. And we hear many other sides of stories, like the whole world is Haredi, and let's look at the pictures of all the people at the wall, and they certainly don't look like me, and I can't perform anything anyway. So how do we find that place where we connect and support what I think is the most important little plant?
Great. So let me is it okay if I give here a longer answer? Okay. And this is my opinions, okay? These are only I happen to be right. But they're only my opinion. It's a coincidence. Here's where you're not helpful, okay? Well, first of all, the more I speak to North American Jews, especially younger, Israel feels more and more far away from them for two reasons. One, the occupation. Two, monopoly of orthodoxy over Judaism in Israel. Meaning a sense that Palestinians don't have enough rights and Orthodox rabbis have too many rights. These are two different problems, not linked to each other. Two different problems. Most people are aware of the fact that the conflict of the Palestinians is very problematic. It's very, very complicated. It's not that simple. It's not that solvable. I mean, some people think it's very solvable, just do this and that, and the problem will vanish. Most Israelis don't think so. Most Israelis feel like it's very, very complicated. The monopoly of orthodoxy over religion in Israel is not complicated. It's simply distorted. It's not complicated. There isn't a catch-22 here. When it comes to the occupation, there's a problem. Most Israelis think we shouldn't control the Palestinians. Most Israelis think we shouldn't control the Palestinians. We should not. Yeah, that could have sounded, yeah. We should not control the Palestinians. The same majority doesn't really trust those Palestinians. We don't want to control them for very good reasons. We can't trust them maybe also for not bad reasons. There's a history here. So that's a catch-22. Because we don't want to control them, but in order to leave the territories, we have to trust. So this is a catch. It's very complicated. So when you're criticizing us, well, it's very complicated. That's why Yesh Atid comes. Yesh Atid says, you know what? We can't solve this deal with other issues. But orthodoxy, on the other hand, there's no catch here. It's not like leaving the territories is a very big risk on our security. Taking the rights from Orthodox rabbis is not a very big risk on national security. But here's the problem. I would say if you can focus, it's important for you to have a voice and important to make a powerful statement to Israel. When you come out with both messages simultaneously, it's hard to listen to you. It's hard to listen to you. And here's the problem, and I want to offer a quick political analysis of the Israeli realm of politics. One needs to, Haredim are not, the fact that Orthodoxy controls Judaism in Israel is not because the Orthodox Israelis are bad people. It's not because they're corrupt. Ehud Olmert is not a Haredim, he's going to jail now. It's something unique. It's just, part of power, I guess. Haredim are a minority of the population that own a majority of the power on this issue. Why is that? And the answer is simple. They're just very good politicians. They're doing their job. And this is what they're doing. We, mainstream Israelis, what do we care for? The conflict. We want to solve the conflict. Right-wing Israelis have this belief that there's one way to solve the conflict. Left-wing Israelis have a belief that there is another way to solve the conflict. But they never have a majority. So the only way to get their way in solving conflict is making a deal with the Haredim. So the Haredim, they say, okay, we'll support you, but all we want is to guard our monopoly over religion in Israel. So that's why the left will always give the Haredim the monopoly to do Oslo or the disengagement. The right will always give the Haredim monopoly to build more settlements. So, because the conflict is so important to us, the Haredim have so much power. We'll always trade the horse of pluralism in Israel in order to promote the way we understand we should deal with the conflict with the Arab world. You know how the Haredim will lose all their power? If we start caring about pluralism in Israel more than we care about the conflict with the Arab world. At that moment, we could create coalitions based on pluralism and not based. Here's my fantasy government. Okay? I'll say this and then vote for me, okay? I'll say, my fantasy government next election, 17th of March, is a strong Yesh Atid leading to a national unity government. And a national unity government without the Haredim. And what's the big deal? How could they live in a government together? On the following premises. The right promises will freeze settlements. The left promises will freeze the peace negotiations. Now that actually makes sense. I'll tell you why. You know why the right wants to build settlements a lot? To stop the peace negotiations. You know why the left wants peace negotiations? Because pretty soon they're building so many settlements, it will be too late. So because we're building settlements, we need to make peace. And because they're making peace, we need to build settlements. If both sides would trust both sides, it's not going to happen. But if both sides trust both sides, if we could freeze settlements and freeze peace, so there is no reason for now settlements, and there is no reason for now peace. The Middle East is in turmoil. Most people understand that maybe we should wait to see how the Middle East, organizes itself before we go on long. There's nothing long-term in the Middle East now, so it's absurd to think of a long-term deal in a very short-term area. And if we can agree on that, so we can create a government. So if we freeze settlement initiative and freeze peace initiatives, what do we work on? We work on religious pluralism in Israel. But for that, and if you would come and say, Israel, we understand that this issue is complicated. We're leaving that to you. But we want you to be in a conversation with us on pluralism in Israel. That would be a new, fresh voice. That would be a new, fresh voice. So in your relationship with Israel, if you could bring that voice to the table, and if Israelis will realize that the relationship between religion and state in Israel has everything to do with the relationship between Israelis and the world Jewry. That's not very clear to Israelis. They think it's our problem. They don't know it's a larger problem. If that can be made clear, I think that the less the government controls religion in Israel, the more this new movement of engagement with religion will have momentum.
Thank you.